We do the work. 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 This is our land. Oh, we do the work. 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 This is our land.
Welcome, folks. You're listening to the Labor Forum here at WRFG 89.3 FM. That song that we start the program off is by John Fromer. Obviously, we do the work, and it describes kind of who comes on this program, the issues we talk about. It's about all the things that concern those of us who do the work, and that's the majority of us, the way big majority, not just in this country, but around the world. My name is Diane Mathowitz. I'm a retired auto worker. I worked for 30 long years on assembly lines for General Motors. I'm a retiree now, a member of UAW Local 10. And my co-host is seated next to me here in the WRFG studio, Paul McLennan. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, Diane.
And we're back for another great program here on Monday, November 14th. Paul, by the way, is a retired MARTA worker, and he is a member of ATU. That's the Transit Workers Union here in the city, Local 732. And Christopher Hollis is on the board, and Christopher has become not just a fabulous engineer here at the station, but has become quite involved in so many of the struggles that we talk about here as a student at Georgia State. And a low-wage worker. And we're hoping that Dawn O'Neill is able to come. She is our third co-host. She is a staff person now for the Fight for 15, and that takes a lot of her time. And we're hoping that she's going to be able to walk in. If not, we'll hope to see her again next week. All right, so the opinions that are expressed on WRFG's Labor Forum may not necessarily be those of the Board of Directors, staff, or volunteers here at WRFG. But, you know, I never can say that statement, which we're kind of required to do by FCC rules, without making it super clear that the Labor Forum is a program that is totally in sync with the mission of this community, progressive, independent radio station. And that is that, and we certainly can see it on all the media that most people watch, CNN or any of the other corporate media and big newspapers, that you can search and search and search for articles that talk about any issue from a working class point of view, that take the side of the working class, that expose really how the system works to produce profit for those that own the factories and the banks and all the various corporations, and those of us, as the song says, who do the work, and we're the ones who keep the society running. So the Labor Forum is an important part of WRFG's mission. And I do want to thank everybody who contributed. The fall pledge drive did end as of midnight last night, Sunday night into Monday morning. I haven't seen the results of it in terms of whether we met our goal of $50,000. But I do want to thank again two people who contributed a sizable amount of money, and that's Charlie Fleming, who is president of the state AFL-CIO, and Janine Brown, who is a labor activist, and I believe her union is the CWA. And I want to thank both of them on air because they have recognized, not just in words, but in actual deeds and hard, cold cash, how important the Labor Forum is to all those who are fighting for worker rights and the rights of poor people of all different kinds. So I want to thank them again very much. And of course, everybody else who contributed while on air to the Labor Forum or went online and signified that they wanted the labor forum to get the sort of the credit for that donation. I want to follow up by saying that it is never not pledge time here at WRFG. You always can go online and donate. You always can send a check to 1083 Austin Avenue Northeast, 30307. You always can walk in and bring your money right to the office. You actually probably could walk in and give your money to one of us here while we're on air. So I do want to encourage folks, if this last 3 weeks wasn't a good time for you to be able to donate some money, and next week or the week after or the month later is, please do keep us in mind. We do depend on you, the listener, to keep this station on air. 43 years now. It's a remarkable, remarkable achievement. And we want to build this station, get our programs to be better, and meet your needs even more.
Especially in this time.
Especially at this time. All right. So I just have come from out of town, and I didn't do labor headlines today. And I guess what I want to say is, if there was a labor headline, I did read about how in Europe there was sort of an emergency meeting of various heads of European countries, and they want to talk about what it means to them that Donald Trump is the president-elect of the United States. And then I read about all the demonstrations that have taken place across the country, starting even really before the election was the voting was sort of finished in California, where tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of people have come out into the streets. Students have walked out of school. There have been all manner of protest. Make sure that Donald Trump and his cabinet, which is appearing to be just an unbelievable number of people who really will see so opposite of what WRFG and the Labor Forum stands for. So those demonstrations are going on. So I guess that's our national headline news. And then our local news is the same. Atlanta was not left out of that, all the cities that people gathered. And so I just want to say that in the coming weeks, we're going to have more discussion, because one of the things that disturbed me about the analysis that's been offered by corporate media is they made a reference to the white working class. And they talked about people in the white working class that voted for Trump. My view, and I think the Labor Forum's view, is there's only one working class, and that's everybody of all nationalities, races, genders, and everything that work, who do the work. And so we can say some white workers may have voted for Trump, but I really disagree with making it that there's like a white working class, a Latino working class. That's a kind of, to me, a form of dividing us up. And so I don't want to let any of those, elements in the working class who didn't take a position of solidarity. But I don't like this phrase, white working class, and we may have a conversation about that, whether everybody else agrees with me about it. All right, so we're going to move right into Paul's This Week in Labor History.
Okay, thanks, Diane. On November 15th, 1830, the state legislature of North Carolina met in secret session and enacted the two most repressive measures it had ever passed. One was called an Act to Prevent the Circulation of Seditious Publications, which banned bringing into the state any publication which inspires revolution or resistance among enslaved or free African Americans. A first violation of the law was punishable by whipping and 1 year imprisonment. Those convicted of a second offense would receive the death penalty. The second law forbid all persons in North Carolina from teaching slaves to read and write. A white person convicted of violating the law would be subject to a $100 to $200 fine or imprisonment. A free black person would face a fine, imprisonment, or between 20 and 39 lashes, and an enslaved black person convicted of teaching other slaves to read or write would receive 39 lashes. These laws were passed in reaction to a radical militant anti-slavery pamphlet, which had been written by David Walker, a free African-American abolitionist living in Boston. He published an appeal to the colored citizens of the world, which advocated for racial equality and called on free and enslaved African Americans to actively rise up against injustice, racial oppression, and the institution of slavery. His appeal was the first published document to demand the immediate and uncompensated emancipation of all slaves in this country. David Walker was born on September 28, 1785, in Wilmington, North Carolina, to a free mother and a slave father who died before his birth. Despite his free status inherited from his mother, he grew up with a hatred of the institution of slavery. He witnessed firsthand the horrors of the system, including one disturbing episode of a son who was forced to whip his mother until she died. He left the South saying, "Remain in this bloody land, I will not live long. I cannot remain where I must hear slaves' chains continually and where I must encounter the insults of their hypocritical enslavers." He traveled extensively around the country and by 1827 had settled in Boston, where he set up a used clothing business. Active in helping the poor and needy, including runaway slaves, he earned a reputation within Boston's black community for his generosity and compassion. In 1828, he married a woman known only as Emily, most likely a fugitive slave herself. Walker began to associate with prominent black activists. He joined institutions that denounced slavery in the South and discrimination in the North. He became involved with the nation's first African-American newspaper, the Freedom's Journal, out of New York City, to which he frequently contributed. By the end of 1828, he had become Boston's leading spokesperson against slavery. On September 28, 1829, he published his appeal, which was quickly and secretly distributed among African Americans. He sewed copies of his pamphlet into the lining of sailors' clothing, and in this way, the pamphlet made its way to the South, smuggled on ships from Boston or New York. Walker called on enslaved people to lay aside abject servility, to unite and rebel against their masters in order to free themselves. He spoke to whites, urging them to cease their inhumane treatment of slaves and warning that your destruction is at hand and will be speedily consummated unless you repent. The response from the white power structure was swift and harsh. Jacob Cowan, a literate enslaved man in North Carolina, was sold downriver to Alabama after he was caught with 200 copies of the pamphlet for distribution to other enslaved people in the community. Copies of the pamphlet found by Southern officials were destroyed. The state of Georgia offered a $10,000 bounty for Mr. Walker's capture, and several Southern states passed laws to further oppress both enslaved and free African Americans. The appeal had significant impact and is widely credited with turning the abolitionist movement in a more radical direction and setting the stage for later insurrections such as Nat Turner's 1831 rebellion in Virginia. Just 5 years after he arrived in Boston, Walker died in the summer of 1830. This was 3 months after the publication of his pamphlet's third edition. Though rumors suggested that he had been poisoned, most historians believe Walker died a natural death from tuberculosis. The disease was prevalent, and Walker's only daughter, Lydia Ann, had died from it the week before Walker himself died. His son, Edward G. Walker, was born after his death, and in 1866 became the first African American elected to the Massachusetts state legislature.
Thanks again, Paul. I'm always So I do, Christopher, do we have a message from WRFG? We do. We'll hear that, and then we'll be right back.
Dakota Sioux and other indigenous leaders at Standing Rock, North Dakota have called for a day of action on November 15th to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. This $3.8 billion pipeline will run over 1,100 miles and carry highly flammable and toxic fracked oil over land in Lakota territory and under major water sources, including the Missouri River. Thousands of people have joined the struggle to defend indigenous rights and protect the water. Hundreds have been arrested, tear gassed, beaten, and shot with rubber bullets while peacefully resisting the destruction of native burial in sacred grounds. The Atlanta Day of Action to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline will begin at 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday, November 15th at CNN, located at 190 Marietta Street, Northwest. We will then march to SunTrust headquarters, located at 303 Peachtree Street. SunTrust has invested millions of dollars into the pipeline. The protest will demand that the financial institution divest from the pipeline. For more information, there's a Facebook event page called Atlanta Day of Action to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. This is a public service announcement brought to you by your listener-sponsored and supported community radio station for progressive information, 89.3 FM, WRFG.org.
Welcome back. You are tuned to the Labor Forum here at WRFG 89.3 FM. And our first call-in guest is on the line. Paul, you want to let everybody know who we're going to be talking to?
This is Ava Cardenas with the Georgia Not One More Coalition and a lot of other good activities in the community. And really happy to have her join us today. And Ava, could you talk about the action tomorrow? Well, maybe back up. Tell us what the situation is in Standing Rock, as far as you know right now, and why this National Day of Action was called.
Sure. Thank you all for having me so much. Can you guys hear me okay? I have you on my headset and sometimes they don't work.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so basically tomorrow we will be participating in a National Day of Action in solidarity with the people of Standing Rock. As many of you have heard, for those that haven't, the Dakota Access Pipeline Project is a project that was given by the Energy Transfers Corporation. Now, Energy Transfer Corporation is based out of Texas. This project, the Dakota Access Pipeline, was initially set to be for the pipeline to be routed through Bismarck, which is a mostly white population. Once the people in Bismarck decided that they were going to basically cite very real concerns about the pipeline breaking and the harmful effects that it might have, the Dakota Access Pipeline Project, Energy Transfers, and the Army Corps of Engineers decided that they were just going to reroute it and essentially pass really close to the Lakota indigenous land. And basically, essentially, what this pipeline would do is that it would go under the river. And the concern here is not just solely for indigenous people around what happens when a pipeline bursts, but it's also the biggest concern around what happens when you have a river who around 3 million people depend on clean water from it, and the exposure and the damage that would cause. In addition to that, the Dakota Access Pipeline is going through 8 ancient burial grounds and also traditional sacred sites. Weeks, the indigenous folks and through tribal leadership have been pushing the Dakota Access Pipeline to stop constructing, citing obviously the sacred sites and the disruptions of sacred burial grounds. And even though people have entered documentation into legal courts to acknowledge those things, the Dakota Access Pipeline continues to build. From what we understand today, we should be hearing something around the Obama administration around either the rerouting of this project or people are somewhat hopeful, but we understand that when companies and banks alike have money invested in these projects, they're not going to kind of stop because there's people that are actually suffering violations of human rights and suffering violations through law enforcement. So we know that that's a potential that people that the administration could potentially stop or reroute this pipeline. But what we understand is that from what we've seen, corporations really don't care about there will be enough people. And so because this has been happening since April, and way more before that, the encampment started back in April and it's still continuing. There are people that are coming in as we're speaking. Right now, Indigenous folks that are training people, they're stating that about 1,000 people are being trained every week now. So that gives you sort of a sense of how much people are coming in to support. We are asking for folks that can go to go, particularly people of color, indigenous communities, the LGBT community. We're asking folks to go if they can, but if they cannot, we are asking people to participate in the events such as the solidarity actions that we will be having tomorrow. Now, our action that we're having in Georgia is around the bank, which is headquartered here in Peachtree, to defund and divest from this project. SunTrust Bank is one of the many banks that has provided lines of credit, close to about $4 billion now, to construct this pipeline. And so what we're asking is for you all who have a bank account with SunTrust, Wells Fargo, Citibank, to move your money away from those banks, to divest from corporations and banks and institutions that are basically financing all of this. They're financing not just a pipeline, they're financing the militarization of the Oregon Sheriff Department. They're militarizing the response. We have had reports of youth being shot with rubber bullets. We obviously have seen the images of the private company that was hired not too long ago to sit dogs on people and children alike. And so our concern here is that this is not just an Indigenous issue, it's also like an environmental issue, but it's an issue that impacts all of us because we all really do depend on water. And we know that like this is not being taken serious because of the elections. It's not taken kind of serious because, you know, when we talk about it, Indigenous folks are sort of kind of seen as like, oh, they're mythological, they no longer exist. And folks are still here and they're still fighting. And so we're sort of participating in the solidarity action to highlight all of the issues that accompanies when we put profit over people, when we are more concerned about how can we export millions and millions of oil, not for the production or consumption of our people in the internal island, but rather how are we selling this back and how we're not divesting and moving from a different source of energy. And so we are going to be meeting at CNN tomorrow, where that would be a meeting point, where we're going to also be highlighting sort of the irresponsible journalism that is happening when we kind of do a mission and not talk about these issues. And then we will be marching to the SunTrust headquarters that is on Peachtree, and we will be given sort of like an ask to demand that SunTrust basically pulls out their line of credit from the Dakota Access Pipeline. And so we're going to be meeting at around 11:30 and then marching around 12 to the SunTrust Bank. And we're asking folks to come and show support. Again, this is a solidarity action. This is a solidarity action with the people at the Sacred Stone Camp, with the people at the Red Warrior Camp. This is a solidarity action to kind of bring forth and highlight the issues and sort of highlight the atrocities that banks are doing at this point. And so we're asking people who are going to come. It's a friendly event. It's a nonviolent event, and we're asking people to come and show their support and solidarity in a respectful manner. Most of these marches, most of the actions that have taken place at Sacred Stone Camp and sort of to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline from constructing have been based around prayer, have been based around sort of bringing forth these issues, not just as an Indigenous sovereignty issue, but an issue that is impacting all of us. And so we're asking folks to come out and support. We're also asking folks to come and get involved in any local organizations that you are aware of, particularly any organizations to work around any extraction issues or extraction sites in Georgia, because we also understand that pipelines don't just happen. They also are happening in our lands right now here in territories that, you know, we're Indigenous ones, and we want to protect that. As allies, we want to be part of that protection process. So yeah, we're hoping that people will come out tomorrow at CNN. It's a meeting point, 11:30. There is more information on our Facebook page at Atlanta Solidarity with Standing Rock against the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Wow. So anyway, you did a whole chunk of information right there. So I'm going to
I
ask,
know.
because we have some more time, I'm going to ask a few questions if it's okay. One of the things I have obviously noted in that most of the coverage is you have to go on the internet. You have to use alternative sources. You have to use news that comes from Indian country. I don't know how many months it was before the first major network did anything, and I think it was after they used the dogs on people. And I want to comment on that and ask you to as well. So this was a private security force that the pipeline company hired. And I think it's good for people to know that as far as I understand, the company they hired was GS4.
That's right.
And who is GS4? GS4 is one of these groups that has essentially become sort of a mercenary paid kind of company around the world. They have supplied forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. They also have in Palestine. They provide equipment and different kind of monitoring equipment at the checkpoints and at the prisons. It was a big struggle to get them actually, and a successful one, to get GS4 to stop doing business for Israel in the occupied territories where Palestinians essentially are under the most brutal occupation. And this is the company that has that reputation that the pipeline hired. And so it wasn't in some ways out of the ordinary for them to use dogs who bit people and the heavy weaponry that they used. One of the other things that you find out when you go online, though, is the incredible number of indigenous people, not just from the United States, which in itself is remarkable, but from around the world. Could you comment on any of the other that indigenous people have actually traveled all the way to Standing Rock to make it clear that there's a global solidarity with this struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of one of the amazing things that we're seeing, that indigenous people have been trained for this to happen, and I think that indigenous folks have this great connection with the earth, that they understand sort of how the implications when we sort of create this
Ava, are you able to speak a little louder?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Cool. No, I was just stating that, I think it's amazing to see the number of folks that have come out and support. Last week we had the Alaska delegation of all women, indigenous women, come through Standing Rock and do massive support with communities. And so we're seeing that over 300 indigenous communities have now are either part of the camp itself, have provided this kind of support, and are part of the leadership in sort of like how people move, like the decisions that are being made. And so we have folks from all over the nation come and support, and yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really beautiful to see the amount of effort and the amount of love that indigenous people have for us, right? To put their lines. I mean, I think it's important for people to understand the reservations where a lot of our indigenous people have been forced are low in a lot of basic needs, and some of those are sort of infrastructures around connecting us, via phone and stuff. And so one of the things that we have seen is sort of the repression from the state, the intentional use of signal scramblers, the intentional use of militarized response. When you look at, we're talking about people who are essentially praying to water. They're doing actions around prayer, and they're being attacked with dogs. They are being followed by tanks. There's accounts of drones flying over, of planes without lights at night. Right now, what we're seeing is that the company, that the Dakota Access Project, is building day in and night. And so what we are seeing is that they're using massive floodlights to disrupt people and their sleep patterns. And so what we're seeing is not something that is just kind of happening because people don't know how to act. We're seeing that these are intentional attacks to repress people. And for us to kind of acknowledge that these are the same tactics that are being utilized across every single neighborhood that we live in. They're being used across other lands that are being occupied right now. So this is not a thing where it's like, oh, they don't know how to act with it. Rather, they're using tactics that have worked in the past to displace people, to extract resources, and to basically continue down the wrong path of natural extraction when we could be moving into a different route of energy in a responsible way. And so we do want to highlight that over 300 indigenous people have come together. It is one of the largest sort of gathering of folk that we have seen. And they are coming together around the notion that we have to protect the sacred, that we are the stewards of this earth, and if we do not protect it, there will be nothing else for us to protect, and we can no longer exist without us protecting the earth. And yeah, just to go a little bit back to the point of sort of the media whiteout that's happened, if Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! Had not been there, that would have never, the dog attack would have never been reported, and then to see sort of the backlash that reporters and journalists that are trying to do their job are getting, right? They're being charged with felonies at this point. And so when you think about sort of this is something that I don't think a lot of people are used to seeing in occupied America, right? This is something that you see in other countries. And this is actually happening in our backgrounds, but the reality is that the companies that have a lot to benefit financially from, and so there is an intentional media whiteout. There has been an intentional sort of omission from news channels to report what's happening on the ground. And we're hoping that all of these actions sort of highlight the importance of having actual journalists do actual work reporting this, but also the government actually doing its job of protecting the people that have placed them in the positions, and the police to remember that they're supposed to protect and serve the public, not become sort of paid mercenaries, as you've mentioned, because at this point, this is what's happening. The police department is receiving massive amounts of donations in guns, in weapons, and in militarized tanks that were used in Iraq. I mean, that just kind of shows you the level that these companies and sort of for-profit are willing to go to, right? They're willing to injure people who are indigenous to the land, who have connection to the land in a very spiritual way, for the sake of oil and for the sake of profit. Because it's not about not being dependent from other countries. This is about actually a company that's going to be moving oil from tar sands that are already creating massive destructions up north throughout the whole U.S., or what is now known the U.S., so that they can export and make money. This is not for like the consumption of people that live in the U.S. It's just for solely exportation and making money out of it.
So, Ava, thank you so very much. This was really a very informative discussion that we've had with you. And so we just want to repeat one more time that this event is tomorrow, the 15th, and at 11:30, assembling at CNN, marching at noon to SunTrust Bank.
Where?
And again, that there's information on the Facebook. Could you give that address one more time?
Sure. It's Atlanta Stands in Solidarity with Standing Rock.
Thank you so much. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
one.
you, Ava.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Paul. Bye.
Christopher, do we have another message? We do. And then we've got our guest here in the studio. We'll be talking with Sekou in just a moment. Stay tuned.
Hey, Serafina.
Hey, Mom.
WRFG's third annual Carnival of Cultures is coming.
How exciting. Sunday, December 11th from 2 to 5 p.m. at the Rush Center Annex in Candler Park.
Yes, we'll be opening with Jamboree Mas Incorporated, an energetic Atlanta-based carnival troupe dancing in authentic Caribbean finery.
Aja of I Divine will be sharing her beautiful award-winning vocals for our listening pleasure.
WRFG's Global Drumbeat World Rhythm Nations, Glenn Simmons, will be our master of ceremonies, with his co-host, Empress Aja, joining him on the mic.
Fantastic. We'll have our silent auction with unique one-of-a-kind items from around the globe.
And the food. We'll have lots of it. High-quality, delicious food donated by local eateries of varying international flavors.
And get this, in place of our live auction this year, we'll have a raffle, but this ain't no ordinary raffle.
Really?
Yeah, we'll be raffling off incredible one-of-a-kind experiences, including a year-round pass to all shows at Blind Willie's and much, much more.
You can check out our auction and raffle items on our website starting mid-November wrfg.org. To close out the Carnival of Cultures and to provide you with a dynamic dancing opportunity, Shola Lewis of African Experience Worldwide, alongside his band, Small Axe, will be bringing it live and loud to WRFG's 3rd annual Carnival of Cultures.
Sunday, December 11th, 2 to 5 p.m., Rush Center Annex, 328 Mel Avenue, Atlanta, 30307. Tickets are $20 at the door. Children 12 and under are free.
Visit wrfg.org for more information or call 404-523-3471.
That's WRFG's end of the year fundraiser extravaganza, Carnival of Cultures.
See you there.
And we're back, and I want to thank the listener who called in and made the correction. I believe I said Gs4, and it might be G4S.
G4S was the security company.
Yeah, is the security company. And so thank you very much. And because you can actually go online and look them up and see all the many places in the world where they have brought militarized tactics to confront populations. So we're going to turn to our next topic. And this is kind of, it covers lots and lots of areas. And so we wanted to talk today again about the impact of the Fight for 15 in altering, raising up, just really changing the conversation about what it is to have a more or less a living wage in this society, and the idea that people can live either on something like a state minimum wage here in Georgia of just a little bit over $5. It's almost incomprehensible. Then to have a federal minimum wage, which is $7.25. Again, in 2017, almost, to have of money. So there are many different people that we've had on the program to talk about the impact of the Fight for 15. We've had many different low-wage workers. We're kind of taking a different tack today. We're really talking with an organizer in the Black community, Sekou Kamati. Hi, Sekou. Welcome to the Labor Forum.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right. So one of the issues, of course, is that there's many issues that all different kinds of organizations, all different kinds of sectors of the population have really seen as a way for them to move forward in some kind of progress, limited maybe under the system that we're under, but certainly something that is a learning experience and that actually has an impact and improves their conditions. So you, as an organizer in the Black community, have been multiple different events. You're a member of the Street Groomers, you're active in Fight for 15, housing justice, all like that. And we want to sort of have a overview of how they're all connected.
Absolutely.
But we wanted to talk a little bit about why and how you are engaged in this fight, how it's connected. Is that a fair thing that we want to do, Paul?
So.
All right. So talk to us and talk to the WRFG audience, because one of the things we do here on this program is that our concept of labor and what a labor forum should talk about is that it should talk about everything that's important to working class people. Many different voices and many different ways that workers are trying to make a difference. And this is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I want to thank Diana and Paul, my brother here, for inviting me on, and of course Jay, who runs the Fight for 15 down here in Atlanta. But as it relates to Fight for 15 and my involvement with it, I think it's crucial. You can't resist if you're working 2 to 3 jobs a day. I know people who work, at the airport here in Atlanta, Hartsfield, Jackson Airport. They're working 2 to 3 jobs. That's a natural reality because the wage in terms of what they're being paid is low. So we want to teach people. We got to be able to at least give them some type of living wage. He called it survival pending revolution. You got to have some type of livable livable substance so you can survive even with the bare minimum. But as it relates to the other stuff I do with Housing Justice League with 10 friends and different individuals like that, you know, your ability to make money or a certain livable wage is connected to your ability to get affordable housing, you know, and different things.
Decent health care.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Transportation, it's all connected.
You know, your ability in terms of your income level dictates your, you know, your living level. You know, if you're a low wage worker, usually, you know, you live in the bare minimum. You know, really, you're not living, you're existing within this paradigm, you know, we call America. So that's generally what I would say as an opening remark.
So on this question, which I think really is a question that doesn't get addressed enough about the time that people have in their life to do what they want to do besides work. So could you say a little more about how important it is to have a living wage so that you can participate and, like you said, resist the things that are going on and be active in the community?
First of all, I think it's insanity that we're paying for food, clothing, shelter, water, everything that was here before we got here. So that in and of itself is insanity, and it's a contradiction that must be exposed. But as it relates to we as human beings, we're naturally curious. We want to live, we want to experience, but we're stuck at work all day. We don't get fully know what it means to be a human being. So you know, it's really crazy. So you say I work 9, sometimes 12 hours a day, making $7.25, or you say in the state of Georgia is $5.15 an hour. You know, when do I get the time to do what I want to do? You know, I want to go to college, or I want to do certain things. I don't really get to do what I want.
I want to talk to my children.
You know, you got to see your children at daycare, and daycare even sky high. Even when I was going to daycare, my mother tell me, you know, in terms of child care is expensive. So on top of paying your bills, you know, really they pay just enough to pay your bills that you don't create some type of competition between the workers and the establishment. So you know, I think it's crucial that, you know, we have people having a livable wage so they can experience life outside of working on a plantation.
It's interesting you would mention Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, because I just came back from a trip out of town, and on my way, I was in the restroom, and a woman attendant was in there. She was talking to somebody else, and she was saying that that's what she makes, $7.25 an hour, and she was talking, you know, about how supposedly she was supposed to have been getting a raise, and I don't know how much big a raise it was going to be, but she was talking about how they hadn't seen it yet, and about how many, I can't remember. She's worked there for years. She's worked at the airport for years and still makes $7.25. And when I was overhearing her, right? You know, she wasn't having the conversation with me. I was listening. Because I always listen when people are talking about their jobs, and reflected that exactly, that she has to work so many hours at this lousy pay, and that she really can't get by, and that her daughter also has another low wage job, and still that between the two of them, they still can't get by.
I worked at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport for a company called Prime Flight, one of the cheapest company you ever worked for. You know, I was making $7.50 an hour. $7.50 an hour working on airplanes. They're extremely hot. Sometimes you get air conditioning, sometimes it's not. You know, you get there probably 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. You probably don't leave till 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning. You know, you're working all night. You're gonna sleep a good portion of the day because you're up all night. So, you know, it's a reality at the airport. Most people at the airport working 2 or 3 jobs. I can say that for an actual fact. The airport is the biggest plantation in Atlanta, because you got different contracts that works for the airport. So, you know, I know the experience of it. And working there, you looking at all the big fields and the airplanes going. You know, we always used to have a joke. You know, I can't wait to get on the plane. Next time I want to see a plane when I'm not cleaning one. And as a joke, you know, my job description basically was I think I was like cleaning planes, but as a way to define my role the way I wanted to, I used to call myself a biological waste specialist. You know, so you got to dignify.
You were?
Hey, as far as I'm concerned, so
Well, let's go back to some of these. And one of the things we've had so many of these workers who here in Atlanta and around the country, we've seen this just emergence of people who are essentially kind of invisible. It's all the folks who do cleaning, whether it's in a hotel or at the airport or just wherever. It's the folks who are in the back of a kitchen and or maybe serving, but the ones in the back washing the dishes and cooking the food, and all these jobs that are absolutely essential for how we function in this society. So little, being treated so bad, having no benefits, and yet they're really in many ways the backbone. And so now this movement of the Fight for 15, in my opinion, has just brought them, if you want to say, out of the shadows. And they're the force that's moving the whole discussion about the big gap between the rich and the poor. They're the ones. I wondered if you wanted to mention anything about that, because again, there have been folks on this program who maybe didn't finish high school or certainly didn't have a chance to go to college and are the most articulate, the most reasoned, just the best representatives of working class folk.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But Fight for 15, in my opinion, is one of the strongest labor movements in the United States, or whatever. But as it relates to that, I don't have a high school diploma myself. And I think I'm pretty smart to a varying degree,
Absolutely.
So in terms of closing the gap between I don't really like using the term rich. I just call them crooks or what they are. But the rich and the poor, what they commonly call, because I believe we should define our own roles within the context of this experience we call life. So closing the gap between the rich and the poor, some type of livable wage, or developing what they call a so-called middle class. It's a fight that must be won. We fight will we win. So $15 minimum wage. That's you say you work 5 days a week. That's $120 a day. Now that's, as old folks say in the black community, that's good money. You can do some things. You can travel. You can make some shake with that. So I think it's essential that people get involved, or like Fight for 15. They do feed you. They take real good care of you. They go out of town, or like one of the protests fighting for the workers, or workers' strike, things of that nature. They take good care of you.
Could you comment a little bit about, in just these few years, that literally tens of thousands of low-wage workers from so many different kinds of fields, whether it's childcare workers or home care workers or servers or hotel, restaurant, airport, fast food. And there have been some actual concrete wins. And I think it's really important that people understand, just like you said, when you struggle, we win.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Frederick Douglass, the great ancestor, he said, there is no struggle, there is no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. And, something that's been conceded with the power structure among the workers is 20 million workers have won the raises, and one in five, well, 20 million workers throughout the United States have gotten raises in it, but it took 400 years to get from 0 to 725. We can't wait another 400 years. So that is a victory within itself. And poverty is violence. Poverty is a form of gentrification, and I would even say genocide to a varying degree. Because you can a person who came down to take care of the family don't really feel like a man, or feel like they withholding their responsibilities. Of course, we can't forget about the sisters. I don't know where the world would be without them. So, that's something, some of the victories that have won, 20 million workers have conceded, some type of, some living wages within the United States due to the election and different things on that.
All right. So now, obviously, there's been an attempt to put a in the state legislature to raise the minimum wage. It pretty much gets knocked down every year. But on the local level, I understand Fulton County has raised theirs minimum wage, and it's so funny, 15, because that would be You know, that would be
That's too
showing
much
that
money.
it was.
Yeah.
So I believe it's like 1490 or 1495,
And it could have
or
had
it could have been
more sense.
1499.
I know, right? Yeah.
But almost $15 an hour here in Fulton County, the lowest wage workers. And I understand, you know, the little town of Clarkston. Now they only have a couple of city workers, but they, you know, they took the right step and raised that. And so even though it was only a couple of folk, that made a big difference to them.
So did that also just happen in Atlanta as well?
Atlanta's researching it, and Gas South though has increased.
Okay. Gas South and Atlanta's researching it. Thank you.
I guess the question to me is, I think when people win, regardless, this group, that group, like we just had a conversation about Standing Rock, and Ava said that there was a possibility that there was going to be some news today. You know, maybe that there's going to be some situation where the pipeline, there's some success in defeating it. If there was a victory at Standing Rock, that would just reverberate everywhere. When every time there's a victory with Fight for 15, it just spreads everywhere, because it seems to me it just says to people, again, who I say are marginalized workers who feel they're have no power. And we always are trying to say here, we are the people that absolutely have the power.
Absolutely. If we stop absolute compliance with the system today, it will collapse today. You know, so, you know, as it relates to what you were saying with, you know, the Standing Rock resistance, you know, I always say support the protectors, resist the oppressors. You know, our duty is to fight. And we don't get too many wins as a collective group of, you know, people, working class people within the United States of America. So any win, I think, should be highly celebrated as, you know, give us some momentum to keep going and keep fighting. You know, one little small victory is not enough. We got to continue to fight. But that one smaller victory can add our momentum and give us some self-esteem. Because, you know, some people, or, you know, low wage workers, or those who happen to, you know, live in, you know, bare minimal conditions, become kind of pessimistic as it relates to life, very cynical. So, you know, a low fight for, you know, $15 an hour can do a whole lot for an individual in terms of self-concept and how they view the world.
Say something about why the Fight for 15 is so important in the South, given the history and the legacy of slavery. Why is the Fight for 15 so important in the South?
Well, I would say like Malcolm X, anytime you're south of the Canadian border, you're in the South. But as it relates to pertains what is called the Southern United States and the history of slavery, here is, you know, this is a racist state. You got a governor, you know, a current governor, not in 1865, a current governor, Nathan Dale, that called children of African descent in general. I think he was, you know, he wanted to say worse than what he said. He said colored people. He called it children, colored people. He said, you know, I want to help you. You look colored children, and you strike it down. So, you know, the history of, you know, Fight for 15 in relationship to the South, in relation to the labor and the slavery, has an absolute connection. But you know, it does something to the racial dynamics, because Fight for 15 is multiracial, multicultural. You know, it has a lot of different factors. So you know, it comes in direct confrontation with the whole ideal of a pristine Dixie belt, if you will. You know, if that answers your question.
Here we are at the end of the half hour. we have to go. So do you have the information about how people can get in touch with the Atlanta Raise Up Fight for 15?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always go to at ATL Rise on Facebook or on Twitter, and you can find more information as relates to that. And you can also go to 404-408-5968 for more information. Fight for 15. 404-408-5968.
Thanks a bunch, Sekou. We'll have to have you back again.
Hey, absolutely. Ready for the revolution.
All right. So, folks, this is our program for today. And next Monday, we're going to have
Terry Eaton, who's written a book about an important event that happened here in 1990 when homeless people took over an abandoned building and fought with a developer. And the developer, Dakota, was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building back up and running. And he was able to get the building and the whole cycle that we're still seeing today with gentrification and development, we can look back at history and bring it up to today and the things that we're still having to deal with.
Okay, so please do tune in next Monday for the next edition of the Labor Forum, 4 to 5 o'clock. And stay tuned for all the programs here at WRFG. Next up is Democracy Now! And again, if you've got a few dollars, make sure that you can make a donation to WRFG. You can go online, wrfg.org, and we will be on the air. And thank you, too, if you do that. Goodbye for now.
We will not bow down to racism. Yeah. We will not bow down to injustice. We will not bow down to exploitation. What you gonna do? I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand.
WRFG Atlanta, 89.3 FM. Your station for progressive information. WRFG provides a voice for those who have been traditionally denied access to broadcast media through the involvement of a broad base of community elements to guarantee that access. In the utilization of the Foundation's facilities and in its programs, the following communities will receive first priority: those who continue to be denied free and open access to the broadcast media, and those who suffer oppression or exploitation based upon class, race, sex, age, creed, disability, sexual orientation, or immigrant status.
From Marrakesh, Morocco, at the UN Climate Summit, to the front lines of the anti-Trump protests in New York, this is Democracy Now!
Before Trump, America was starting to show signs of a more progressive, a more diversified America, and it made me feel like I had a place in this country. But now with the Trump administration, it makes me feel a little bit more on the edge.
A friend I know went to high school on Wednesday, and people were saying racial or religious slurs.
Now we are going down, getting our marriage license next week, and we are getting married, okay? While we can.
Major protests continue against Donald Trump across the United States, and they will likely expand with Trump's pick of Steve Bannon as its top strategist. Bannon has been accused of being anti-Semitic and of running an online haven for white nationalists at his website, Breitbart.com. We'll speak to the Southern Poverty Law Center and go to the street protests in New York, then to Marrakesh.
People all over the world have becoming voiceless. Voiceless not because they cannot speak. Voiceless because their voices are not heard in decision making. So we are here to impress, to ensure that 1.5 degrees